This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Valeria interviews Tim Grimes, the author of The Joy of Not Thinking, a radical approach to happiness. You don't have to battle through things or constantly strive to improve yourself. We often try hard to do this, and it usually fails in working. The truth is, most of us just need to become more relaxed because we aren't that good at it. Thinking less and becoming more relaxed is, surprisingly, enough to positively change things. In short, we usually don't have to do anything. We just think we do. This is very good news. Once we realize that most of our thinking doesn't mean anything, and that we don't need to be so logical and serious all the time, we begin treating things differently. We call into question some of the painful notions we hold dear, like that being a very serious person is worthwhile. It usually isn't. Or that trying hard and being the hero will lead to success. It usually won't. Not thinking allows us to flip many of these popular myths on their belly and expose them for what they are: falsehoods. Again, to be blunt, if we can just learn to be less special and relax more into what we already are instead, good stuff will happen to us. It doesn't take an elite skill to drop the useless overthinking. Instead, we can begin doing it by occasionally acting the way we did when we were 4 years old. Being less serious is one of the easiest ways to relieve stress. In other words, it's one of the more straightforward ways to eliminate your overthinking and a great starting point for doing so. We should understand there's nothing wrong with being serious when we feel like it, in the same way that there's nothing wrong with thinking and being rational when we feel like it. If you genuinely like being serious at any given moment, that's perfectly fine. If you're serious and feel good, there's no point in being less serious. But when you feel like crap, you're going to find it incredibly helpful to say, screw it, and drop the serious thinking as best you can. So, what we're really focusing on here is overthinking and being too serious. It can seem subtle, but when we feel worried or depressed, overthinking is the likely culprit. And even if we're aware of this, we often go on autopilot when it comes to our difficult emotions. We generally lack the self-confidence needed to quickly make ourselves feel better. We assume the solution for feeling good is too far out at sea to possibly reach it, even though in reality it's already with us right here on shore. One of the main reasons for this is because of how stress is portrayed in our society. Most of us are unaware we can work with negative feelings, fear, anger, loneliness, anxiety, etc., to minimize their lasting impact. Unfortunately, stressful feelings like these are, in many ways, the accepted cultural norm. We're essentially expected to feel crappy a lot of the time. Therefore, many of us become used to being overrun by tough emotions and assume that's just the way it is. Looking at the world around us, it seemingly confirms why we constantly have these overwhelming feelings. We, in turn, communicate to each other about how bad we feel, directly or indirectly commiserating about how tough life is. It seems very, very hard. Yes, we're depressed and scared. Why wouldn't we be? It seems crazy not to be scared, but we can test all these assumptions by examining how we think and what happens when we don't. Tim Grimes is a coach, speaker, and writer of multiple best-selling guides on alternative stress management, including The Joy of Not Thinking and Relax More, Try Less. His focus is on simplifying the stress reduction process for anyone who is interested. Here is the interview with Tim Grimes.
In your own words, who is Tim Grimes?
Tim Grimes is just a person like everybody else. And I am somebody who is interested in reducing my stress and teaching other people how to reduce their stress if they want help reducing their stress.
That sounds really good to me, because it seems like I need to hear this at this time as well. Before we talk about the topics in your book, or you call it Guide, The Joy of Not Thinking, a Radical Approach to Happiness. So my first warm-up question is, what is joy to you, Tim?
That's a great question, because I guess that joy can mean different things to different people. But for me, joy, first of all, it's the feeling of being content and fulfilled in the present moment. Which, as far as I'm concerned, there only is the present moment. And at the same time, joy, at least for me, is something beyond just feeling. It's not just a passing emotion or something like that. I guess you could say it's deeper than a feeling. It touches truth. It touches a timelessness, and you feel that, you're aware of that. And it's something deep within you and without you that's just present there when you feel, truly joyful. So that's what I would say joy means to me.
It's challenging to describe in a way.
Yes.
And it's different from happiness, you're saying, in the way we understand happiness, that it's a feeling that comes from external stimulation. Could be like pleasure. I think it's very much confused with happiness too, and joy, by having pleasure. So what are you saying? That joy is something that is not connected to anything that is outside of us. It's within.
Yeah, I think so. And, I should say that I like using the word happy and happiness. I don't think there's anything superficial about that. I just feel like happiness, as you touched upon, is more of an overplayed word. And we think about external satisfaction and what we have to do externally to become happy, while joy, we usually think of it more as something that you are. And that's what we're focusing on, is what we already are. How do we access what we are in the truest sense and become fulfilled or happy by doing that? So it's becoming happy from within as opposed from without.
So my next question is about the mind. What is the mind and what are thoughts?
I don't know. And this is what's always interested me since I was adolescent, since I was 13 or 14 years old. And I never figured it out. And I don't expect I'll ever figure it out. And I think that, for me at least, that's the most sane approach, the most healthy and joyful approach. Because I hear people describing what the mind is, especially in spiritual circles, all the time. And it very rarely resonates with me what they say. The Buddhist term, they say no mind. That seems more true than what the mind is. Because what is the mind? What is the mind not? And same with thinking, and what are thoughts? I don't know. I'm more interested in what aren't thoughts. What's not thinking. The guide is called The Joy of Not Thinking. And you have to think. There's no way not to think. So what's not thinking? There's no answer to that. But it has something to do with joy.
The next one's about freedom. What is the meaning of freedom to you?
I mean, I think that it's very similar to how we were discussing joy. Freedom is, again, in my opinion, to be found in the moment. It's not something where a person works on a certain project or even works on themselves for 5 or 10 years and then becomes free. The truth of the matter is you're free right now. If you're able to recognize it, if you're able to recognize the joy within you, that's freedom. There's no future freedom or past freedom that you once had or you're going to have. It's right now. And when we feel joyful, we feel free. It's non-confining. Yeah.
How do we remember this? How can we practice not forgetting this truth?
Well, I think that that's what most spiritual practices, at least if they're genuine, and by genuine, I just mean going from the right place where someone's looking for the truth, someone's trying to resonate with their deepest part of themselves. I think that's how to do it. But it's something that the entire spiritual path is just trying to remember over and over again that we already are freedom. We already are joy. And there's many practical ways to, attempt to access this and to remember it. And it's different for each person. There's preferences that each person has. So, I'll talk to you about some of my preferences and some of the things that I found that have worked well for me and works well for many people I've worked with. But at the end, there's some fundamental aspects of it. And the most fundamental aspect is this being able to access something within you that feels, freeing. And there's no one way to remember that or to do it. And you just got to find the way that works for you.
Yeah, it's true. We do have methods to access that, but in the end, we need to find our own way to accessing it.
Yeah.
It kind of seems to me that everything is the way. Each moment is the moment to access it. There's no any specific way to get there or to remember. But what I like a lot about non-duality teachings, or the way they approach the subject, is that they say everything is the divine expressing itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's it completely. That's it. It's why do you need to remember something that you already are?
Right.
And to bring it back a level, I think that the advice that, non-duality or spiritual teachers are sharing and that spiritual students are trying to take in, it's all the same. It's just trying to practically remember, like you said. But it's all a paradox because there is nothing to remember ultimately. And when we really do feel that sense of freedom and joy, we go, my goodness, there was nothing I had to do in the first place.
Yeah, it seems like we have to remember, because we are using now that reference that you just said of joy, of freedom. There are no words to describe really what it feels like to know that you're connected to everything. There's nothing separate from you. But I guess we create this idea that there is a way, a feeling, or I don't know, an awareness, an awakening moment or experience. And then perhaps we are trying to go back to that.
Yeah, I don't even know. I feel like practical application of this is important if we want it. Okay, mm-hmm. So nobody has to do this stuff unless they want to. That's the first thing, right? But if we are interested in this and want to feel more, aware of our inherent freedom, then I do think we want to be practical about how to do it. So there's like this philosophical discussion about how we're all, always free. But when we don't feel good, when we feel like crap,
yeah, that's true.
It's harder. I'd rather feel good than feel like crap. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, how can I feel good? And not in like a superficial way, but in a way where like I feel disconnected and I feel connected and fulfilled with, right now, instead of feeling like crap. The problem for a lot of us is that we do the other side. Like in normal life for most folks, most people, it's like they're not thinking about the everything is perfect side hardly ever.
Yeah, true.
Maybe we're thinking about that a little bit more, but we still are, I would say, most non-duality, people into this, transcendental space or whatever. Like we still are coming from this perspective where we have this very limited, lackful thinking a lot of the time. And I don't know if that's just because it's programmed, socially conditioned, or if that's just biologically how we're made as humans or whatever. But the truth of the matter is it seems to be there, right? For a lot of us most of the time. So it's very good to recognize that everything's already free. And it's also nice to feel good instead of bad at the same time.
At this time, what do you think is the world's, this relative reality, need? What do you think we need? And do you have a vision for a new reality?
No, I don't have a vision for any new reality. I feel like what everybody needs is everybody wants the same thing. And it's what we talked about at the beginning. Everybody wants joy. Everybody at the end of the day wants to feel comfortable and at peace being themselves, just being, as we like to say, right? And
Right.
in non-dual circles. But we have a lot of difficulty just being. If more people were comfortable just being themselves, there would be, I think, a lot less violence and a lot less strife and a lot less, struggle in the world.
So there's a lot of fear because of that, of not knowing how to access that space within them that is already there, right?
Yes.
It's very true about that. That's interesting. The more we access it, the more peaceful we feel. And you're right, there's more kindness. So we are very kind to ourselves and others. That leads to my next question about love. What is love to you?
I think love it's the same thing as joy on the deepest level. Again, we have to use words.
Yeah.
And joy, freedom, love, they're all similar. I will say that love has such strong connotations in most cultures, including ours, that it's tricky. It's like happiness. It's maybe even more of a volatile word than happiness, because love can transition into I want or I don't have or I need so quickly. So I don't talk about love that much in my writings usually, because I just assume that people already understand that's what joy is. That's what happiness is. And you feel loving towards other people very, very naturally when you feel happy towards yourself, because you don't see yourself as separate from somebody else then. So
true.
I don't feel like we have to worry about love as much as we think sometimes.
Do you somehow connect the understanding of what life is all about, of who we are, to surrender and letting go and acceptance?
Yeah, I do. That's a really good question. I think that what's difficult is surrendering and letting go. And again, I just don't think I've read a lot of different interesting mythology, different methods for how to, let go and how to best, surrender and release. And I found that, some of them work for people and some of them don't work for other people. And there's not one method, again, that works.
Right.
So again, it's just finding what works for you. But I do feel like people sometimes focus a little bit too much on surrendering and letting go, as well as love.
Yeah.
I think it all sounds beautiful. And if it works for you, then absolutely that is what to do. But if you feel like you have trouble letting go or surrendering, likewise, like if you feel like you have trouble loving, then just don't worry about it.
Which goes back to surrender in a way. That's
of course,
a kind of surrender.
Listen, this is all the spirit, if we're talking about, non-duality or, these quote unquote deep spiritual topics, they're all going to come back to the same thing. We're always going to go around in circles. That is, that is the teaching, that is the way it works. And that's it again. And it's not for everybody, but if you're interested, you get something by going around in circles, because we touch each other's hearts when we do that.
What makes us to open up and want to know more about the depth of life and who we are? Like in your case, I know you had an experience. Talk to me about that. What made you to surrender? Using that word.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, I've had several very odd experiences in my life. And a commonality between them, and the experience I talk about at the beginning of The Joy of Not Thinking was a very intense experience I had on vacation and then at a beach where I just felt completely overwhelmed and was really intense, like in intense mental agony and also in physical, pain. And anyway, the commonality between a lot of the strange experiences I've had in my life is suffering. Usually the driver the thing that motivates us to change, whether we like it or not, or motivates us to surrender, whether we want to surrender or not, is the suffering. And sometimes when it becomes so overwhelming mentally, we give up. And this is not, in my opinion, usually conscious. Like, we don't decide we're going to give up. Something, involving the whole mind and body physiologically shifts, and we give up, because it's just like we can't. The reality in our mind, in our brain, like, can't handle it anymore. And when that breakdown happens, all of a sudden there can be a flash of light, as they say. That's when it gets real. And again, that gets back to what we're talking about. Like, that's when you touch joy in those moments. Sometimes when you were in intense suffering, and then you see that it's not real like you thought it was. You realize that it was an illusion, that suffering, and there's an immense feeling of relief, and also of kind of like knowingness at that point. Which is just totally bizarre. And again, if you talk to most people about this, they just think you're crazy.
Yeah.
But when it happens to you, it's it's not really something. It's undeniable when it happens to you and you experience it yourself. So suffering is usually the driver for that. And the joy of not thinking. I told that story at the beginning because the hope with that guide is to show people that you do not necessarily have to suffer like that to have similar experiences where you feel like you're, like, all of a sudden where you realize your thoughts are an illusion and that everything is okay and that you're free. But there's other easier ways to do that. And the rest of the guide is basically talking about some of my preferred ways to do that, which, like I said, are going to be, slightly different or vastly different for other people.
Yeah, I interviewed somebody who kind of said to me something very interesting. She said, it's about giving yourself to life. We are using the words surrender, letting go, and acceptance, but she used the word giving. So it's giving. And it seems to me like you said, suffering kind of propels us into this action, into this realization that it is about giving. And I think ultimately death, physical death, that will become a fact, that we have to give ourselves back to life in a way.
Yes, I when you go through something, whether it's physical or emotional or mental or all of those combined, where it's very, very overwhelming, it does feel like you're dying in many ways. Yeah. So I guess that's seems like a direct comparison when it's happening.
Yeah, you mentioned that about death, feeling as if you were already dead. I had the experience too. It's so amazing. Coming from that perspective, I'm already dead.
Right.
And that's when joy comes in, right? It's like this aliveness. It's the first shift. There are many of them. So many deeper ones can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that for me, I don't know. Like, because whenever I have like experiences where I touch that depth or experience that sense of no self, I guess you would say, or a freedom, I can never compare it to anything else. I can't compare it. So in my opinion, to be honest with you, I don't feel like I'm learning anything or switching or changing or like, I think I used the phrase in that book in the Joy of Not Thinking, the sun is blinding. Like, it's very, very bright and it blinds you. There's nothing, there's that Buddhist saying, nothing to gain, nothing to lose. It's like that. And you give yourself to life, but how are you supposed to not give? Like, you don't have, what choice? Right. There's no choice.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
True. You can fight against it and then suffer. That's the other choice, I guess. We have.
Right. Or you can not fight against it and still suffer.
Oh my God. You're right. Yeah. Being unconscious. Yeah. Unaware. And I have been getting some inspiration or insights, I guess you can call it, for the physical, the body and everything that's in here, it seems like it's one thing. So it's the universe, the absolute expressing itself in different ways. But somehow we human beings, think our way through it. And we kind of detach ourselves from the experience of being. But there's more to it. It seems to me like the body, it's not really it. Consciousness is communicating with the body, but it's not it. It's around the body, but it's not in the body itself.
Yeah, exactly. The body, or our perception of the body is very misleading.
Right. So mostly we are the receptors for that. Yeah. I mean, there's no even words. Some people call it God. Now we call consciousness, but there's no really words for that, really.
Yeah, and it's very good, to get back to what you said or asked earlier about how do you remind yourself. And what we're talking about right now is just reminding ourselves that we are not who we think we are.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is a way to remind yourself, just to be, again, to be aware or to notice that you're not actually your body like you think you are. You're not actually your thoughts or feelings like you believe you are. There's something else going on. And the person that you think you are is not you. And there is no you. And it does stop conversation. And that's wonderful. That's good.
Yeah, because it's great. It is amazing that we can actually have a conversation about it. You just said that's the reminder. Here, what we're doing is reminding ourselves.
It is. Yeah, exactly. It's trying just to get beyond the words, trying to get back to something that's more natural or feels like it's more of an inherent part of us. Like, again, we can communicate heart to heart without speaking in words that make sense, that in the way that they're supposed to make sense. That's pretty cool.
It is, isn't it? It's like the most amazing dream that we can ever have.
And what's also interesting is that it also, in many ways, I feel like is more natural, as I said. Like, it seems like a dream, but it also seems more natural. It's like, it feels like we should be communicating this way. And maybe other animals and other species are communicating this way. Like, I just notice when I'm really feeling good and in a flow, it's just like there's nothing like overly rational about what's going on. Or when I'm communicating with people and everything feels good, it just kind of flows along. And it's not like, oh, we're planning on doing this and then that will happen. It just, it just happens.
So it is the state of life being life, right?
Yes.
Do you ever use the word God?
Yeah, I use the word God a lot. Western culture, Judeo-Christian, that's my heritage. I was born in New England, in the United States. So I was raised agnostically, basically, and became interested in Eastern religions. But I think culturally, even though I was raised an agnostic, basically, culturally, God is what it's all about. And, whenever you don't have to go to church to feel the presence culturally of God. So I use the term God all the time. I mean, I'd rather use that term than ultimate reality or consciousness or, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's the same thing, but I feel very comfortable with that term. I feel very comfortable, when I see the term in, old scripture in the Bible and stuff like that, God, that makes sense to me. It totally aligns with what we're discussing. There's not like an uncomfortableness or something there,
Do you see a difference between spirituality and religion?
That's a good question. And I think that I do, in the sense that religion is, generally speaking, tends to be organized, and you can't organize spirituality. And in the sense that it gets very, you get away from God and into people again really quickly when you start organizing stuff spiritually. And that's religion a lot of the time, unfortunately, in my experiences. Not always, but I can't ascribe, wouldn't consider myself to be one religion, and I never have, and I never would, because I just feel like that is a total cultural thing and has nothing to do with what it's actually about, which is it's about God. It's about joy. It's about this deeper thing. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, to do that.
Right. Yeah, I'm wondering why so many people choose to believe in a God outside of themselves.
I think that some of it, I mean, I don't have a good answer to this question at all, but I would say my opinion, at least part of it, is that they do know that there's something there, that there's some type of deeper truth, and religion is their only access to it, and they feel comfortable being in a setting with other people, with their friends or peers, trying to touch that in some way. But it's better just to try to go right to the source, like, and that's like when you get to the stuff that we're talking about, just in terms of like teaching, like Zen teachings or non-dual teachings. I mean, that's like the real bread and butter right there. You know what I mean? You're skipping the middleman,
Right. Yeah, I guess most people are not ready for that shift because it takes experience. It's not just an understanding.
Yeah, it's like a commitment in a way. Yeah, it's like a real commitment, it's a commitment not to something outside yourself, like you were saying. Like it's not a commitment to your church. It's a commitment to yourself, and that's scarier for a lot of us.
So let's talk about your work. I guess my first question about writing: how did you become a writer?
Like most things, by mistake. But I always was interested in. I always liked to write. I remember being even like in middle school and working with friends on like plays and stuff like that. And I just always was. I wrote like poetry and a lot of artsy type stuff, like in my teenage years, and then I just kept on writing as a pastime, basically, for quite a while in my 20s, and then I found in my 30s, all of a sudden I was writing about stuff that really interested me, which is spiritual stuff and stress management stuff, and but yeah, there's not one, just kind of happened naturally is what it comes down to, I guess.
I guess my next question is about what change did you notice within yourself during the process of writing The Joy of Not Thinking?
That was an interesting guide, because I've written and edited several similarly themed guides. Basically, the stuff we're talking about is the subject of a lot of the stuff that I write and edit. The Joy of Not Thinking was interesting in that I had just had a child when I started writing that book, or right around that time, and so just being a father for the first time and finding the time to write was interesting, and I don't know, maybe it gave me a little bit of a different appreciation or perspective of the material than I had before. And it took me a lot longer to write that guide, because that's a very short guide. It's only about 60 pages or so. It took me a lot longer to write that and edit it than a lot of the previous stuff I had written over the few years before that. So I think I learned a little bit more about I was a little bit more severe editing it, and maybe a little bit more disciplined than I ever had been. And that might have been a reflection of being a new parent and having to be more disciplined with my time and with myself, I guess.
Right.
Was that the answer you were expecting? Because I feel like I get a really weird answer, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm not expecting any answers. Believe that. I don't think so. So you're using those words that triggers, like even smile, joy. But then when I look at the other phrase, not thinking, this is not just me. I think most people, perhaps, they would think, how is it possible not to think? How can you experience joy by not thinking? How would you explain that to somebody who...
Well, not to plug the book, but read the book, because I explain it better there than what I'm about to say, probably. But in my opinion, and again, it's different for each person, but generally speaking, I've noticed that almost everybody thinks way too much. And when I say thinking, I mainly mean that we think too rationally. We're too in our head. A lot of people think they're out of their head, and guess what? They're still in their head most of the time. So what I've noticed in moments of, like moments we were discussing where I feel very good, very fulfilled, and very joyful, I notice that there are very few thoughts in my head, or at least rational thoughts in my head. It's very much a free flowing, I'm kind of floating along. And if I need to think something because I need to do something, it comes. But otherwise, it's pretty empty in there. And a lot of the time when I'm stressed, it's not that empty in there. There's a lot of thoughts. So I've always been interested since I was a kid, since I was like, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, about figuring out how I could think less rationally, because I realized that thinking is what was screwing me up a lot of the time. And honestly, that's really what I am talking to people about most of the time. Even when I'm talking about other things like happiness or joy or relaxing or whatever, I'm really just trying to emphasize that if you think less rationally, you'll probably feel better.
Overthinking sounds to me like an addiction, almost an obsession.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say that. And I would definitely agree with that.
Yes. Do you also see it that way? That's obsession?
Yeah, I think that, and again, I start to sense what I think. We are basically programmed to overthink. We're addicted to thinking.
Yeah.
I've read that. Yeah, I've read that, heard that many times, that thinking is an addiction, and it's so true. So how do we deal with that? I'm not even saying stop it for good. I'm just saying, how do we deal with that?
Yes.
How do we have moments of respite? And don't get me wrong, it's fine to think rationally. I'm all for thinking rationally if you feel okay while you're doing it. My point is that when we're thinking rationally all the time, we tend to get down in the dumps and feel stressed out more than we would like.
What you prescribing in a way is a life that's more enjoyable and healthier, which is better than the opposite.
Exactly. I would say just feel good, not bad. Figure out a way to feel good, not bad, as much as possible.
Right. So let's talk about those methods in exercise that you suggest. So you have sections for them. The first one you call How to Stop Thinking Through Movement and Noise. And you give some specific exercise. But talk to me about that method. How do we do that?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that I've been interested in for a long time. As I said, when I've noticed that when most people, when they manage somehow to not think as rationally, to quote unquote not think, even if it's just for like a minute or two, it's a big thing. It releases like a ton of stress very quickly. And so the fastest way to do that I have found is to become really physically active, especially if you can become playfully physically active, to basically to stop being serious for just like a minute or two. You can stop being serious for longer, but if you can do it for even just a minute or two, and by that I mean like jump up and down, make crazy noises, twirl in circles, do anything that's like pretty much ridiculous physically with your body. If you do that, it's shocking. It can be shocking how quickly you can change your emotional state by physically being like fully playful for a short period of time.
I love that, Tim. And this is something that became another obsession, physical exercise. Most people, they just get into, I think they are trying to relieve stress and feel good, and then they get addicted to another thing. So it seems like they are trying to get rid of the overthinking or the negative thoughts, and then they engage in activities that also become an addiction. So it happened to me.
That's a great point. It happens to everybody, that's not
right. Yeah, I would say so. So this is different. You're suggesting that we do things like just to break the seriousness, this stiffness of the personality, the identity.
Yeah, this is definitely, there's nothing exercise related about this. This is, you simply do this to feel better. And what I've noticed is that this is something, we'll talk about, some other recommendations I give, but actually being playful like this, even if it's just in short bursts, it's way out of most people's comfort zones. because it's like, as an adult, like we're not supposed to act this way pretty much ever. And so it's radical, you know, like I call myself a radical counselor. And this is really, I mean, how I got into, when I first used that term, it was in relation to this, because this is, if you're doing these type of stress reduction, playful, physical actions, it's like way out of the box. But it can be shocking, as I said, how it can make you feel. And as like a spiritual practitioner, most people who do these things, who have like this kind of spiritual mindset, are stunned by just the mind-body connection and what they can see by loosening up their irrational thought, by jumping around like a monkey for a minute.
Huh.
It's very powerful.
I like that.
I would recommend. I have a video seminar, or, you know, just a short video series. It's free. Just go to stopbeingserious.com, and you'll see you'll see me talking, and more importantly, you'll see me doing some of this stuff. So you'll know exactly what I mean when I say be playful, like use a funny voice, act ridiculous. And it's really simple, and it's still, in my opinion, the best thing I found for myself. And the best general recommendation I have to share with people is do that when most other stuff fails for like reducing your stress. Like, this is pretty consistently effective for making you feel better quickly. You know, for changing your emotional state. I'm not going to say it's going to make you a totally happy person, like, but it's going to, if you're down in the dumps, like a way to feel, you know, a lot less stress quickly. This is, you know, if you can do this, it helps.
Yeah, what I like about it too, it cannot become a pattern, something that's a habit, because you're being creative, like you said. Just be creative, playful.
It's all about it not being habitual. It's always getting out of that habitual box that we put ourselves in.
Right. I love that. And then the next one is how to stop thinking through self-talk.
Yeah, I mean, that's so, you know, being really playful, like we were just talking about, is way out of the box. Talking out loud to yourself is still out there a little bit, but it's like much more accepted. Like, you can do this. If you're listening to this, let me tell you, you can do this. It's funny how we don't talk out loud to ourselves as much as we could. I've just found it's really helpful to talk out loud to yourself, because the inner voice in our head that tends to overthink things and stress us out can be quieted down if you talk out loud to yourself, if you speak out loud to yourself. So I really encourage people to speak out loud to themselves in whatever way they like. Like, you can be very angry with yourself. You can speak out loud to yourself angrily and be like, what the heck are you doing? You're being so annoying, you know, blah, blah. You know, and if you do that for even just a few minutes, you'll probably find yourself calming down. It's bizarre, you know, let alone if you speak out loud to yourself in like a loving way, where it's like, you know, like, I know you've had a long day, and, you know, and you're speaking to your mind now, right? You're speaking to the voice in your head. You know, just, you know, you can calm your inner voice down by speaking gently, using your your out loud voice. And you can speak it, you know, you can speak in 100 different ways to yourself out loud. But the point is, you have to do it out loud. And yeah, I just think it's a great tool. I might write a book about it eventually, because I haven't read enough good books about speaking out loud. It's so obvious, and we don't do it.
Like, you using the senses too, bringing the senses into the present moment.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great mindfulness, becoming present exercise. Like, I love to like speak out loud to myself when I take a walk, you know, because sometimes, you know, you can feel a little bit stressed out, and so you decide to take a walk, for instance, and you're still in your head, even though you're walking. You're like, oh, you know,
true.
And so like physiologically, you're moving. You're like, oh, I should be feeling better because I'm moving, but it's not enough. But if you just do that simple next step of speaking out loud to yourself while you're walking, and again, it doesn't matter how you speak out loud to yourself, but if you're just honest with yourself and how you're feeling, you know, very quickly you can feel better. So
I think it's the last one. How to stop thinking through indifference and stillness.
Yeah. That's more, you know, that's more traditional for us, you know, non-duality type of folks, spiritual folks. That's more of like a meditation type of, you could call it exercise, but I would also just say like perspective, where I found that a good way that I like to, I guess you would call it meditate, is just to, sit down or lie down and physically relax. Like just get as physically as comfortable as possible. So, no posture, no breathing technique, none of that. Just physically relax. I like to do it lying down in bed, but some people like to do it sitting down in like a cushy chair or something like that. And then if you have time, this is not a fast exercise. This is something not to be rushed. But if you have time, if you have 10, 15, 20 minutes or longer, just physically sink into that relaxation, like that physical relaxation of being in that comfortable position. And then just vibe out. Just the thoughts are there, right? And maybe, you start having uncomfortable thoughts, or you physically you don't feel as relaxed after 10 minutes and you're uncomfortable and you just don't care. You're just indifferent. You just let it pass. And this is really nice especially if like you are someone who's interested in meditation already and spiritually, into this stuff, because you just notice how unimportant all this stuff is that's going through your mind and through your body. And often after a little bit of time, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, like you just feel like that deeper part of you can come out.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's nice. Yeah.
Thank you so much for what you do, Tim. But I'm not finished yet. So before I have you some final questions, would you like to add anything that my questions didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I would just say that, when in doubt, think less. And if you ever have any questions for me, my website is radicalcounselor.com. You can, find out how to contact me there or email me at info@radicalcounselor.com. And I will do my best to, answer your questions if you have any. And yeah.
How do you define success? What is to be successful to you?
I think just to feel content and to feel comfortable being who you are, and as to get back to what we touched upon earlier, just to have that sense of joy within you as much as you can, and also at the same time to be okay when you feel stressed out, to realize that it doesn't matter like you think it does, and it's not a big deal.
Right.
That's success. Yeah.
I love that, Tim, that you made that observation. That's okay, too, if you are stressed.
It absolutely is.
And what was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself in this relative reality?
I think I'm still learning it. And at first, because there's nothing to learn. If hopefully if we've made anything clear on this podcast, so there's nothing to learn. But no, I think what is difficult on a practical level for us to learn, difficult for me to learn, is just how foolish our thinking can be and our mind can be, and how we just get spun in circles, and we recognize maybe consciously that we shouldn't get spun in circles, and yet we still feel like we are. And the hardest lesson is accepting that and coming to peace with that. And that can be a life's work. And it gets, in my experience, it gets easier in many ways. We become more comfortable being ourselves. But the hardest lesson, I would say is being comfortable being yourself.
2 more questions. If you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any changes in your life or do anything differently?
I don't know. I think on a practical level, maybe I would, like I wouldn't maybe, plan for being 65 years old if I knew I was going to die next week. But on like a deeper level, I don't think so. Not really. It doesn't matter.
What are 3 things about life you know for sure?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd say the first one is I don't know anything. Right. I would say, again, it comes back to there's this deep thing that we're keep on hitting on, and that is unknowable. That would be the first thing. And then the last 2 things would be practical. And the practical stuff is just, it doesn't matter. It could be wrong. But I would say for sure, I'd say for sure that you can become more comfortable being yourself. And the other thing I know for sure on a practical level is that is that most people think too much.
Yeah.
But there's a footnote to the last two, which is that they're not true, because nothing's true, because we don't know anything. So it's only the first one that matters.
Do you think there's a need to have this state of, not a belief, but trust? Do you ever catch yourself like thinking this way? Yeah, I trust that everything's well, that everything's fine. Do you ever use trust, faith, or hope, those words?
That's a good question. I think that this is a weird answer, but I feel like that operates more unconsciously within us. Like our degree of faith or hope or trust is reflected in how we feel more than like on a conscious level. Like it doesn't, like I can say like I'm trusting right now to myself, but I have to like feel it. That it's more like an unconscious thing. And like when I feel stressed out or worried, I'm not trusting as much. And I can say I'm trusting then, or affirm I'm trusting, but I have to step aside somehow, like we're talking, surrender to it. And to do that on a practical level, I would probably, do some of the things we're talking about. I would talk out loud to myself, or physically get out of my body to realize the trust is already there. If I, if my unconscious is satisfied, if I can align my conscious and unconscious, like then I'll feel better. Yeah, that was a weird answer. I'm sorry, but
yeah, no, I like that, the way you connected trust with this. It's already there anyway, so it's more connected to a feeling than the thinking itself.
Totally, yeah.
Right. So my final question, you already mentioned before your website, but I'll ask again, where can we find more information about you, your work, your books, products, services, and future projects?
Well, my website, as I said, is radicalcounselor.com. That's the best place to contact me. And, that has links to all of my stuff. You can also, if you don't want to do that, you can just go on Amazon and search Tim Grimes, and you'll find me there. But yeah, go to radicalcounselor.com. There's links to all my books, and I'll be putting out something new, hopefully by the end of the year. And maybe I'll have some videos or something beforehand. Who knows?
Who knows? Thank you so much, Tim, for your presence and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Tim Grimes, please visit his website, radicalcounselor.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.